So again, good morning to all of you. It's really a pleasure seeing so many faces here in the audience who are coming to Brussels from even far away to speak about research infrastructures. I'm Nicole Biebow. I'm working at the Alfred Wegener Institute for Polar Marine Research in Germany, and I'm the coordinator of the ARICE, the Arctic Research Icebreaker Consortium project, which is one of the co-organizers. I'm also the coordinator of the EU PolarNet 2, which I guess a few of you know, and currently the chair of the European Polar Board. But we don't want to speak about me today. We want to speak about research infrastructures. Everybody knows that excellent research is only possible with world-class assets, like research stations, like research vessels, like research planes. And our national polar programs are operating these world-class research infrastructures in the Arctic and also in the Antarctic. Their engagement results mainly from a long history in polar research, and it includes significant investment made by the countries. In addition, the European Union also funds, since several years, very successfully, transnational access programs which are implemented to promote joint research at our assets. And I would like to mention the Interact project here, and also, of course, ARICE or projects like Eurofleets, who have proven that this kind of cooperation can successfully be performed, and it gives a lot of benefits to the scientists. In particular, we have offered a lot of opportunities for early career researchers to perform their own research, also in a leading position at the research station and also at research vessels. And we also have given access to the assets within the frame of Interact and ARICE to countries who do not own own infrastructures in the Arctic, for example. And for them, it's of course a special benefit to be able to access these assets via the EU project. But as I mentioned before already, we do not operate infrastructures for the sake of having them, but we want to support the best science. In the EU PolarNet program, we have written a European Polar Research Program, as some of you, most or several of you might know, and with that, a future strategy for European polar research. And in the European Research Program, we clearly identified that we need to improve coordination among our national polar assets, align operation, implement and further develop access schemes, foster interoperability of infrastructures and of course also of data. And very important is also we have to optimize the costs and our environmental footprint. We have to become greener, and the infrastructures need to be more environmentally friendly. And this can be achieved by technology, of course, but also by avoiding duplications of efforts, and that's why we are here. We will discuss all these topics which I mentioned briefly in today's meeting, and I'm really looking forward to lively discussions between the panelists and with you, the audience. Ask as many questions as possible. Before I will now pass the floor to my colleagues from the European Commission, who will officially open the conference, I would like to remind the speakers to stick to their time, and the session chairs to be quite strict with that. We have a very tight agenda, as you have seen, and we would like to allow as much time as possible for discussion. And now it's my pleasure to welcome José Miguel Roncero. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. He's the International Relations Officer for Arctic and Ocean Governance in DG MARE of the European Commission. I think you have been involved very much in developing the new Arctic strategy. And José will now give us some opening words on behalf of DG MARE. Thank you, José.
Thank you, Nicole. Good morning to everyone. I'm just going to set a timer so I don't go over time. So good morning, everyone. And since we are in Belgium, let's also say bonjour, godard, und herzlich willkommen. So as Nicole said, my name is Miguel Roncero. I work in DG MARE in the European Commission, and I work in the unit that deals with the Arctic policy, with the implementation of the Arctic policy. But in the Commission, this is a really Commission-wide effort. So we do the coordination, but a lot of the heavy weight is done by colleagues in other services, in other DGs, and one DG in one area that is extremely important in the EU Arctic policy is research. As many of you will know, in the 13th of October 2021, so a little bit over 1 year, we updated the European Commission together with the EAS, the EU Arctic policy, taking into account developments that have happened since the last update, and also addressing a little bit more specifically increasing challenges, both in the Arctic but also globally, mirroring the different works and policies that we have at larger level in the European Commission, like the European Green Deal. This update, the updated EU Arctic policy, focuses on 3 main pillars. A safe and stable Arctic, where dialogue and cooperation are possible, addressing the ecological, social, economic, and political challenges in the region, nonetheless those that are linked to climate change, and promote and foster inclusive and sustainable development to the benefit of those who live in the Arctic today, and also future generations, keeping in mind or having a little bit of a specific focus on women, youth, and indigenous peoples. These are the 3 main objectives of the EU Arctic policy today, and they have been also the objectives in the past. And these objectives can only be achieved one way or another through research. Research here is really essential. Arctic research, polar research specifically, addresses all these 3 objectives, directly and indirectly. When we speak of dialogue and cooperation in the Arctic, what way to do this besides a diplomatic political level? What's the other way? We have, research is a way to achieve this. When scientists, when researchers are cooperating, institutions amongst countries are cooperating, they are also fostering dialogue and cooperation. So it's not so much only research, it's also the implications, the positive implications that come from there. Research is also an objective on itself in the EU Arctic policy. It's one of the main pillars of the EU Arctic policy and one of the big deliverables that are going to show that the EU is in the Arctic and that the EU is very serious about the Arctic. On itself, Edo will probably speak about this, but Horizon 2020, the hundreds of millions, 350 million put under the previous program and the current one with Horizon Europe. The missions, I guess you will speak about that, so I don't need to address it. But in that sense, also research is an enabler. So I said that research helps, to foster cooperation, but when we also speak about addressing the societal, political, environmental challenges, it is through research that this is done. Policy making should be and is based on the evidence that research is providing. And when we also speak about inclusive, sustainable development to the benefit of those living in the region, we also are doing this through research and research activities. And in essence, one of the objectives, here is that research is not only for the sake of research, it has a societal benefit. This is one of the key elements in Horizon, and also, I'm sure, one of the elements in your institutions back home. And this societal element, this societal benefit is the way to really, the way we are framing this under EU Arctic policy and research. For this, we need data, we need information, we need analysis, and all this is to provide strong evidence for decision-making, for policy-making, as well as for monitoring and understanding the situation. So we have this dual objective here. Before I joined DG MARE, and I was, before working on the Arctic, I was working on emergency response. I was working in DG ECHO as part of the Emergency Response Coordination Center. And there I was leading a team that was helping with the translation of information, scientific information, into actionable information. And here I can tell you the vast reliance and the heavy support that we got from researchers all over the world, people who also understood the need to quickly provide information. So here we are talking about an emergency context, but this also obviously applies to larger horizons. And to set up a system where we could get in a few hours an assessment of a situation. So, the emergency responders could take action immediately and start literally saving lives. For that, there was a vast infrastructure behind that had to be put in place years and decades before, had to be constantly updated, and had to be constantly also taking into account new developments, new technologies, and new ways to gather information. And I believe that for the Arctic is the same, and not only the Arctic, basically any area. Here, infrastructure is needed to collect data, to gather more data, but also to collect better data all the time, keeping in mind that we also need positive redundancies, getting data from different sources, from different angles, so we can also correlate, double check, and make sure that what we are looking at the evidence that research is providing to decision makers is solid. We also need all possible data here. And here we have scientific data as the core. This is obvious, but I should also mention the information, the knowledge that is in local communities, traditional knowledge that can help sometimes and can really be part of this collective data in the Arctic. And for that, again, research infrastructure is really essential. And I could mention, for example, that it's needed to cover gaps at all levels, physical gaps from sensors, from satellite constellations, to also look into accessibility, to make sure that, first of all, the area is accessible, that also the data that is gathered is accessible. There is no hoarding of data in that sense, and also that data can be effectively produced, because what we have in the Arctic still today are many gaps. There are many processes, many areas we are not fully aware of what's going on here. And this is obviously for today, but also for tomorrow. So climate change is a threat today. It will be a bigger threat tomorrow. But this is not only about climate change. This is also about the needs that research can support today, and the needs that are increasingly coming in the next years. And for that, again, infrastructure is key, because the best time to start building the infrastructure for the future is today. Or as often they say in China, the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago, and the second best time is today. So it's the same with infrastructure. And with further ado, well, thank you all. I'm looking forward to listening to the discussions, to learning from you, really, to learning where infrastructure research. So I'm very much looking forward to these conversations and also to the exchanges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these very optimistic and positive words. And it's my pleasure now to introduce Edoardo Casarotto to you. He's the Policy Officer for International Cooperation in the Unit of Healthy Ocean and Seas, DG Research and Innovation. Edoardo, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. It's great to see so many friends coming from all over the world here in Brussels, and welcome to Brussels, in an unusually warm and sunny Brussels. But I'm sure that today it will be really an interesting and engaging discussion. And many thanks for inviting DG Research and Innovation, which I'm very proud and honored to represent here today. And I would say that, yeah, of course, Miguel said already very important points, and I will try just to give a couple of additional messages. And As he said, the Arctic is really becoming more and more the heart of European policy. European policy, but not only European policy. We are seeing in other partner countries, the US just released their Arctic strategy, the EU just released their Arctic strategy. We are seeing the international maritime organizations that never in history regulated shipping in a specific region like the Arctic, now with a new polar code that entered into force few years ago. And the perspective in which the Arctic is becoming central for Europe are several, are environmental, are political, are from a research perspective, from a security perspective. We are seeing the challenges that the unprovoked invasion of Ukraine by Russia is causing now. And yeah, of course, climate change is today probably the biggest threat that the Arctic is facing. We know that the climate and the change in the Arctic has reached unprecedented crisis point. And there was a recent paper that highlighted how, I think, 11 of the 16th area of interest for global climate tipping points are in the Arctic or Antarctica. So this shows us that we really don't have time. We have urgency to act quickly and to act together. And of course, for these observations, science is really fundamental, is central, of course, to understand the rate of change, to inform policy, to understand how mitigation, which are the right policy for mitigation that we can work on. And your work is really essential, especially in the Arctic, where it's particularly complex from a climate perspective, from a logistical perspective, from the rising cost of doing research in the Arctic. With the energy crisis, the price of bunker fuels are growing, and we are aware that this is an important challenge today. And the EU is trying to be at the forefront of this challenge, right? With, as Miguel said, with Horizon 2020, the previous framework program for research and innovation, we supported the Arctic science with around 350 million euro. We are still financing through Horizon Europe, the current framework program for research and innovation, Arctic science in several areas, on biodiversity, on climate change, on biodiversity and sustainable development, of course, and ARICE, Interact are the perfect example of successful projects that have been supported by the EU and this framework program. But we have several others. We have Arctic Passion, for example, on observation. We have Nunatariuk. We have, of course, the European Polar Board, etc. So there's a lot of engagement from the European Union. We are working with our member countries, with our associated countries. Of course, Norway, Iceland, Greenland, they are part of the conversation. We are working with indigenous communities, local communities that have been living in those regions for centuries. We are working with early career scientists and early career ocean professionals, and I know how ARICE and Interact have been working close to youth to support and create new opportunities for young researchers. And another thing that is particularly important is seeing how many international partners we have here today. So I know that we have guests from the US, from Canada, from Japan, from several other partner countries all over the world. And this is a great sign that we can work together. Cooperation is important. The risks we are facing are the risks they are facing. The solutions we are looking for are the solutions they are looking for. And the Arctic is the perfect place to work together because of the challenges I have touched upon and are going to be discussed today, I'm pretty sure. And on this last July, an update, many of you probably are aware, we signed in Washington a new political agreement between the European Union, its 27 member states, and several other partner countries in the Atlantic, including the US and Canada, the All-Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance Declaration, which is a pledge to work together on marine research, to cooperate for the greatest challenges of our time. And I am sure that the Arctic will be one of the areas where our cooperation will focus in the next years. Because we have to work together, and in particular in the Arctic is the right place to do so. And of course, the challenges are many, the costs are many, but keeping the dialogue open, working together, create synergies, create opportunities, it's really the way forward, and this is, and we are pretty sure about that, yeah. And another important update or policy perspective that is important to highlight today, I believe, is the Mission Restore Ocean and Waters, which is a new initiative that was launched in the Horizon Europe framework. So it's an initiative that is based on research and innovation, but it aims at going well beyond research and innovation, with the idea of reaching by 2030 important targets that are linked to the European strategic targets around biodiversity, with the EU biodiversity strategy, of course, the European Green Deal, the Zero Pollution Action Plan, all elements that, of course, are also relevant for the Arctic. And the mission will have, in its initial phase until 2025, a specific effort in the Arctic and the Atlantic on ecosystem protection and restoration. So we are supporting new calls, new projects. We are looking at create more synergies with existing initiatives, not only at the European level, but also at the national level, regional level, local level, new way of engaging citizen and coastal communities, building trust and new solutions based on impact-oriented science, outcome-oriented science that we really need to inform our future policies. And to do this, we also launched the Mission Charter, which is a call for action, let's say, a pledge that is open to all stakeholders to cooperate together, work together with these different initiatives, with different programs and projects for the common targets and objectives we have for 2030. So I invite you to Google the Mission Restore Ocean and Waters. You can find a specific link on the charter where you can read it, you can pledge your initiatives, and you can join the conversation, which is just starting, but it will offer several new opportunities in the next few years. And with this, I think we are almost done. I take the opportunity to thank you again for being here, for the work you're doing, for the support you are giving to policy. Continue to give us strong science. We really need it now more than ever. So thank you, and I wish you all a very fruitful discussion today, and looking forward to the next engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are now speaking, we are now having 4 introductory talks, I would say, and we are starting our first session with Jennifer Mercer from the Forum of Arctic Research Operators, who is a co-organizer of this conference. Jennifer is the section head for Arctic Science within the Office of Polar Programs at the National Science Foundation, and she is the chair of FARO. And Jennifer will speak about transnational cooperation of operators to support scientific research in the Arctic. Jennifer, it's my pleasure.
Thank you, Nicole. This is really great to see this many people turn out for a one-day meeting. Excuse me. You'll notice that I'm on the agenda a few times today, so you're stuck with me. And I'll save maybe my most interesting comments at the end of the day. But it's great to meet in person after all this time in the pandemic, and really nice to see everyone. I think we asked ourselves when we started organizing this meeting, will people turn up for a one-day meeting? and this is a testament to the importance of this topic. I want to express my appreciation to my colleagues and co-organizers for making this meeting happen. All of us, we've spent a lot of time on this, as well as the previous workshop, which I'll talk about in a second. And so my job this morning is to pivot us from the overarching policy perspectives, which I'll try to wrap into the comments at the end of the day from my perspective, to sort of the nuts and bolts, I think, for this meeting. Okay, so as Nicole said, I'm the chair of FARO, which is the Forum of Arctic Research Operators. I'm also the head of Arctic Science at the U.S. National Science Foundation, so I'm here at this meeting in my FARO role, or wearing my FARO hat, but I think you'll also hear my sort of U.S. And National Science Foundation perspective sneak into the conversation at times. I can't help it. Okay, so what is FARO? FARO, we sort of affectionately think of FARO as the counterpart to COMNAP in the Antarctic, but we're much more casual. And we are an organization, though, that brings projects and people together. So I'll talk about kind of the history of FARO in the next slide, but we establish cooperation and development of new ideas, facilitating planning, coordination, and access to facilities, which is really important for today's topic. We work to optimize logistics and operational support, encouraging exchange and dissemination of data, promoting interaction between the Arctic science community and those concerned with Arctic policy, as we just heard from our colleagues. And then we provide advice to scientists, policymakers, and other organizations regarding logistics in the Arctic. Okay, so FARO is a country member organization that serves as a forum for logistics and operational support. It was formed in 1998, and we currently have approximately 20 member nations. Each nation is actually represented by an institution, so for the U.S. National Science Foundation is the institution member for FARO. And that institution is usually a major Arctic operator with a national network to the other Arctic operators within that country. And then a representative from the institution serves as the national point of contact to FARO. We are operated by an executive committee drawn from the membership. We have a chair and a secretariat. And then any country that's engaged in Arctic research operations is actually encouraged to join FARO and participate in the activities. So as you can see, and this is one nice thing, I think, well, because it goes beyond just the borders of the Arctic 8. And this is the current membership roster for FARO. Many of our European countries and colleagues are here today. And then, of course, Canada, the US, Iceland, China, Japan, and Korea are all members as well. Russia has always been a member of FARO, but of course, just like every other organization, we've paused their membership at this time. This is the current makeup of the executive committee. I think many of us are here today, which is great. We're missing a couple of members. And I just want to mention the prior workshop that is the predecessor to today's workshop. And this was a workshop that was held remotely during the pandemic and during Arctic Science Summit Week in 2021, right? When we did that. And that, it was delayed from 2020 because of the pandemic, and then we finally held it in 21. And the title of that workshop was International Access to Research Infrastructure in the Arctic. There is a paper or workshop report published in Polar Record. You can see the reference there. And those were very fruitful discussions. And so from that, we are now here for these in-person discussions. And then I think that to sort of wrap this up, this is a really timely meeting for FARO to talk about transnational access to infrastructure and sharing of facilities and resources. We are at the point of developing our 5-year strategy. We're looking toward the planning and our role in ICARP 4 and other large initiatives. And then, of course, we're always working to strengthen our interactions with other groups such as IASC and COMNAP. And that's the end of my comments for this morning. Thank you.
Which is my colleague Renuka Badhe. She is the Executive Secretary of the European Polar Board and has previously worked for several other organizations, like, for example, the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research. Renuka will speak about European leadership in coordination of polar research and infrastructures. And it is not really centered here.
So we continue with the technical issues for a little bit. But until then, I introduce myself and I start my timer. My name is Renuka Badhe, as Nicole just introduced me. I've been working with the European Polar Board for nearly 8 years now. And I'm here to talk about European leadership in coordination of both polar research and also infrastructure. Why do we go to the polar regions? They are our canaries in the coal mine. They give us information about the rest of the planet. And then I will try to use my slide. Yes. These are distant regions of the globe, and we have to work quite hard to get there. And this is where the polar infrastructure comes in. Both the Arctic and Antarctic are very much connected to the rest of the planet. They might look distant, but they are connected to the rest of the planet, and there is great connectivity, and hence any changes that take place in the polar regions directly affect us sitting here in Europe and the rest of the planet as well. So when we go to these distant polar regions, the infrastructure required to do that requires extremely complex, energy-intense activities. It's logistically and safety challenging operations. These are inaccessible areas we are trying to go to, and hence the cost of these operations is extremely high. The maintenance of these polar infrastructure is quite difficult and has to be at a very high priority for governments around the world. Hence, it is upon us to ensure that all of these expensive and difficult to maintain polar infrastructures are utilized to the best of their ability. The different capabilities of infrastructures is also varied by the different countries that own these and operate these infrastructures. And hence it is very important to share knowledge between these different countries that have these different abilities. Why do we need cooperation then? Both the Arctic and Antarctic have their own unique issues, and there are some cross-cutting issues as well. Europe leads the way here. Europe brings together the poles at all different levels, both for infrastructure and for research as well. European countries own a range of polar infrastructure at both polar regions. Europe has, through funding from the EU and also work through organizations like the EPB, different projects like Interact and ARICE provides transnational access to different infrastructures, and organizations like the EPB make sure that the infrastructure knowledge and sharing takes place across all of Europe. There's also, across all of these projects and organizations in Europe, there is a lot of work going on interoperability of these infrastructures as well. And I'm going to give you a bit of examples on all these three. So one of the projects that we are involved in quite heavily from the EPB, and Nicole is the coordinator of, is EU PolarNet. And this project brought together two extremely important deliverables that have led to many further developments in the infrastructure field. So the first one was the European Polar Infrastructure Catalog, examples of which are kept outside. Please feel free to pick them up. And also a white paper on infrastructure access and interoperability, and that white paper contains a lot of information and recommendations on how to make sure that access and interoperability actually happen in the world. EPB comes in as an organization like FARO. We are a membership-based organization. We currently have 29 members from 21 countries. We bring together a mix of expertise. So our members are research organizations, funding organizations, logistics operating organizations, and also university-type research centers, et cetera, et cetera. We bring in both we bring both the poles together. So we have Arctic and Antarctic expertise. We act as the central contact point. So if you want to talk to any of the European polar organizations, the easiest way is talk to us, and through us, you get access to all of the 29 members in one go. And EPB has taken on those 2 deliverables that I showed you in the last slide, and has been working on harmonization of infrastructure and logistics using what we now call as Poladex. We have a talk on Poladex later today, so I won't go into too much detail on this. But just as a quick summary, it's a globally unique product. It provides a comprehensive information about different types of infrastructure from both polar regions. It currently has a European focus, but we are slowly trying to increase our focus on other areas that would be helpful to our mainly European audience as of now. Poladex is also an important example of bringing together different facilities and ensuring that the metadata standards that are used for these different infrastructures can be utilized across the board. Another great example of EU leadership is through the project ARICE. And again, you're going to hear a little bit more about this project. So I will just say that it is a really fantastic example of how transnational access can work, how people can get access to different infrastructures that are not owned and operated by their own country. The same happens with Interact as well, and this is for terrestrial. It's a terrestrial access organization, and there's another talk right after mine for that. Interoperability is an incredibly important aspect that we have to consider, and one of the fantastic examples is from the Netherlands, which apart from its containerized laboratories, has a very small environmental footprint in the polar regions. However, despite this very small footprint, they are globally quite well known for their research. So the way they do it is through sharing infrastructure with other operators, and also by leading on what they have as containerized labs. So these are independent labs that can be carried to either pole, and they need just a docking station with basic physical facilities. So this makes their operations much more flexible and much more agile. This is something that has been worked on within both the European and international field for a few years now. We've been cooperating with EU PolarNet, and we've raised this issue about sharing polar infrastructure at large occasions like the All-Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance Conference, like Edo mentioned. We have also, we have done this for several years now so that the issue gets raised time after time, and it retains the importance, and it kind of retains in people's memories as well. So some of the long-term outlooks that we've come through, that have come through from all of this work from several years now, is that we need to ensure that best practices are shared between different projects, organizations, and also between the 2 polar regions. We have to improve access to polar infrastructure, not just polar infrastructure, but also access to samples and also data through things like transnational access that are being put forward now. We need to further improve virtual and remote access to polar infrastructure, which will end up reducing our environmental footprint in the polar regions. And we really have to aim high. As a polar community, we have to aim towards a truly interoperable European system, both infrastructure and science, and logistics, and also shared operations. Thank you very much.
We are a bit out of time, so nevertheless, the next speaker is my pleasure to introduce Verónica Willmott from the Alfred Wegener Institute. She's working in my team there, and she's the executive manager of ARICE. Verónica, come and speak, please. Her talk is on making the Arctic Ocean accessible for excellent science.
Thank you very much, ladies, gentlemen, colleagues, many of you friends. So as Nicole said, so I'm the project manager of ARICE, and I'm going to talk, of course, I'm going to introduce you a bit to the project, but as well on the difficulties and on the settings of Arctic science, marine-based science. So most of the Arctic is covered by ice throughout the year, but this is, of course, starting to change. We all have seen that as the temperatures are climbing. The ice is becoming more mobile, more unstable, and more difficult to predict, which is also causing risk as well in the polar regions. On one side, the scientists are racing to understand the changes that the ocean is suffering, the Arctic Ocean, and also to understand the changes in ecosystems that this entangles. But on the other side, the global leaders are trying to regulate these newly open waters in the Arctic Ocean. The Arctic is a very harsh environment where remote operations and autonomous operations are very difficult to implement. Even the satellite recordings or Copernicus satellite data, for example, is very limited in the Arctic region, is limited to the surface of the Arctic, and also with the difficulties of understanding the snow cover, for example, on ice. In addition, so ground truthing is needed. That's one of the constraints of satellite and all the autonomous measurements. So there is a need to access the Arctic Ocean to address the research gaps and to establish baselines for future projections and to understand where the system stands right now. There are, of course, several scientific initiatives that have taken place in the recent times to understand the role of the Arctic Ocean. And I'm going to highlight a couple of them. Among them, Mosaic, for example, initiative was a one-year-long expedition in the Central Arctic, and as well the Synoptic Arctic Survey, which put together several icebreakers working simultaneously. But those actions are limited, so they were one-time actions, and they are not continuously done year after year. So this is a limitation, and there is a need for sustained observations in the Arctic Ocean. Right now, there are 21 European research vessels that are operating in the Arctic Ocean, but from them, only 3 are research icebreakers, between PC1 and PC3. Those are the polar research vessel Polarstern from Germany, the icebreaker Oden from Sweden, and the research vessel Kronprinshaken from Norway. The rest of the vessels, we have some 7, which are ice classified between PC4 and PC7. That means that they can access the Arctic. Of course, from PC4, they could access summer season, single-year ice Arctic areas, to PC7, which much weaker capacities, only able to break very, very thin ice, and only in summer. And the rest of the vessels that operate somehow in the Arctic Ocean, they are just below the PC requirement, so that means that they can only operate where there is no ice at all. The situation, as well, as you all know, with the political situation, is that so we have lost access to half of the Arctic. That's the truth. 50% of the Arctic we do not have access right now, which is a big challenge. But on the other hand, we work very well and we cooperate very well with our other partners in the Arctic. So there are other icebreakers, other international icebreakers from US and Canada, for example, that are partner in ARICE. And we will see them later. So it's in this context that ARICE enters into scene to try to improve the access of scientists to the Arctic Ocean, to access vessels which are not operated by their own nations because they do not own, or their vessels operate in different regions. And to do that, we do that in 3 ways. So first, by better coordinating the existing polar research fleet. Second, by offering transnational access to a set of international high Arctic research icebreakers. And on the third point, by collaborating with the maritime industry in a program of ships and platforms for opportunity to use the increased traffic in the Arctic Ocean, which is a fact and we cannot deny, to collect data to understand better the system. So these are the 6 vessels that are partnered in ARICE, where we have offered access to researchers in the Central Arctic. So Polarsten, Odin, and Kronprinshaken are the only icebreakers we have in Europe, and as well research vessel Sikuliak from the States, and the Amundsen from Canada, that is a Coast Guard, and Fenica, which is an industry vessel. From ARICE, we have contributed to several impacts, and I'm going to highlight here only 4 of them, which just to keep limited time. So we have contributed to a wider and simplified access to research icebreakers, offering access to 6 research icebreakers, as you saw before. 66 researchers have been able to access these vessels in a total of 359 days, ship time days, which is a lot of access in the Arctic, taking into account the situation. And as well, through the Ships and Platform of Opportunity program, our cooperation with industry, which has become very successful, with 38 researchers accessing a total of 127 days. This, of course, has as well impact on the interactions of researchers among themselves to establish new collaborations, as well on the young and early career scientists, which have been able to lead cruises in the Arctic, and as well industry science cross-fertilization. Very quick, I will be quick. We have contributed as well to large-scale initiatives such as Mosaic and the Synoptic Arctic Survey. We have sent scientists in those 2 initiatives. We have contributed to training of new generations with the Mosaic School on site, bringing more than 20 scientists on the icebreaker through the Mosaic campaign, and as well online with technical training and soft skill webinars. You will see a poster is hung on the training activities as well. And we are also contributing to a better management of the continuous flow of data with the ARICE 3D icebreaker, which is a novel way of accessing icebreaker without actually setting a foot inside. And our cooperation with Emonet, with a map viewer, metadata catalog, and a cruise report database, which is currently being implemented. Thank you very much.
Spoiled my own rules and we are a bit delayed, but nevertheless, it's my pleasure to introduce my friend Margareta Johansen. She is the coordinator of the Interact project, which we heard already about a lot. Maybe the most successful transnational access project, not maybe, it is the most successful. She works at Lund University in Sweden, and what I'm still really like is she's still performing research next to her coordination work and works a lot at Abisko Research Station in Sweden. It's your turn, Margareta.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning, everyone. Buckle up, it will be a speed talk, so, let's get going. And there was a bottom here. Which one was I supposed to just right? And I'm really bad at right and left. Let's get started. Shuf. Interact actually started already 2001 as a network of 9 research stations. Then we were called Scanet. It was just around the North Atlantic. In 20 years' time, that network of 9 research stations grew to 90 stations. Thanks to the contributions from EU, both in the 5th Framework Programme, in the 7th Framework Programme, and then now also in the Horizon 2020 programme. This continuous support, not continuous, but this support has really enabled us to grow and develop as a network. As you all know, something happened in the beginning of the year, so now we are down from 90 research stations to 69, but we are hoping that this pause will soon end. Yes, let's stay positive. What does Interact do? Well, we provide access, and you will hear all about it later from Hannele when she will be describing it. that is the part of an infrastructure project that you are supposed to provide access, and we do that to many stations. We also network, and we are really focusing on extracting all the wisdom that exists within the station manager. How can we put that together and put that into handbooks and guidelines that you can find outside of in the where we are having a coffee break later and things like that. That you will hear all about from Morten and Elmer later. We are also working on education and awareness, working with more than teachers from more than 50 countries to try to ask them, what do you need in terms of educational material? How can we provide and help you? Because we want to make sure that what we know and what we learn from the research in the Arctic can actually benefit the society. We are working with industry. How can we work with industry to improve and make it easier to do the polar research? And you will hear more about everything that I'm talking about later. So maybe I should not repeat that all the time, and we will save another 3 seconds or so. We are also working with indigenous peoples, local and indigenous peoples in the Arctic. And again, you will hear more about this from Niklas in the audience later on. And you know what, Nicole? I did it half time. So if you want to know anything more about Interact, then please visit our website. We also have a Facebook account. You can just bring out your mobile phones. You have 30 seconds to do that, all of you, and just sort of like Interact. Good. And then also we do have a Twitter and an Instagram account to keep you updated on what's going on with Interact. So thank you very much, and you will hear more about it from all of my colleagues.